Welcome to the Business of Thinking podcast. This is the place for high achievers who want more than motivation. They want mastery. Here we skip the surface level talk and go straight into the psychology of high performance.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Thinking. My name is Richard Reed, and today we're going to talk about the theme of adversity. And for many of us, adversity fills us with dread. It's something that we actively try and avoid, and yet so often it's something that helps to shape our direction in life. It's something that can change our view on ourselves and our lives. And also it can reveal interesting things in terms of skills and aptitudes and strengths that maybe otherwise we wouldn't have been aware of. And today's guest is very much all about how it is that we can embrace adversity. Mark DeBellis, welcome to the show. Really great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And you work on a project called The Gifts of Adversity, don't you? You've got a website and you basically curate stories and collect stories all around how adversity has shaped people's lives. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this area.
Yeah, well, I would say that I got to a point in my life, at this season, the later season of life, the last quarter, let's say, and I began to really reflect on, life and where my life has led me, and looking backwards at the experiences I had, and I realized that probably for the very first time how valuable these challenges that I went through in life were to me in building certain skills and character and other important lessons that came to me because of difficulties. And when you're in the midst of it, we all are in the midst of it from time to time. We don't really enjoy those things. But I thought that it would be important upon that reflection to begin collecting those kinds of stories and, helping people tell their story. And the goal really is to try to give people perspective, especially the younger generation. So that's really the core goal, hopefully to share with people that adversity typically isn't permanent, and it certainly can be. But even if you acknowledge it as being something that is long-term, understanding that and being able to kind of lean into it and own the outcome is very powerful itself. So we can't avoid it. So we just have to learn to live with it.
Absolutely. So it's a reality whether we like it or not, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely. And we'll delve into that in a little bit more detail very shortly. But tell us a little bit about your personal backstory, how this relates to this thing.
Well, at a young age, my early teens, our family really got split up through a number of different circumstances. Parents were divorced. Mother had mental issues, had a tremendous nervous breakdown. And so we were, after that experience, our mother, who I love dearly and respect and, idolize, really struggled to keep our family whole and to keep, the basics together. It was just a terrible circumstance. And so we bounced around through many different experiences for a couple of years as part of that. We were in and out of campgrounds. We lived with friends. We were homeless for a period of time. And it was one of those hand-to-mouth experiences. And during that, of course, I happened to be the oldest in the family. So I had, I think, more responsibility than I should have. But, you do whatever it takes to get through. And those lessons, as crazy as they sound for a young man to be doing some of the things I did, by the time I, was 18, I had built up all of this resilience and all of this knowledge and just this worldliness, I think is probably a good way to capture it, that made me much older in my perspective. And so, at 18, 19, 20 years old, I knew how to do things. I knew how to, make things happen. And I didn't realize that until I looked backwards and it just helped me understand how fortunate I was to be able to sort of get toughened through those experiences, learn how to handle myself, handle difficulties, think creatively. And once I got into the working world in a professional sense, I just had some color that others didn't have. And I think that really helped differentiate me.
And was it then that you became fully aware of that? Or were you aware of that as you were going through that process?
No, I really didn't become aware of it because truthfully, when you go through difficulties, and I'm sure I'm not unusual in this, you often don't want to admit that you're in the middle of something, or acknowledge it to others that you've gone through certain things. We always, I think many of us, I certainly do, and I know many of us, keep a facade on our experiences so that we appear perfect and we appear kind of infallible. But once I think you get to an age in life, and that's where I'm at now, I just have no problem with being transparent about those things. But I think when I was young, like many, you really don't want to let anybody inside to see those things. So I dealt with that by really denying that I even went through those things and never would share some of those early experiences with anybody because I felt I was less than, maybe the average person because I had to experience those things. But, and I'm sure we all have things like that. They're all different. They have different titles on them and different experiences, but those are things that are gifts. And, you may not see it immediately, but you typically will see it at some point. And that's where the beauty is. And that's what I wanted to try to identify in this site is, and it, as we age, especially, we have the benefit of hindsight. When we're in the middle of the fight, we're not embracing it typically, or we're trying to get away from it, if anything.
Yeah.
But it's that look backwards, that allows us to see, wow, look how I got through that. If I can get through that, what else can I get through, right? And so it really was just, again, unpacking all that for me to see that. And then once I realized for myself those things and saw the benefits, I really felt it would be so valuable to help other people see those things and then to share those with other people because everybody has their own journey, their own unique experience. Probably no two of us are alike in that sense. And they've gone through the same thing, but in a different way or whatever it might be. And then trying to create the perspective that these people have that I've shared on my site about, what that meant to them and how they were able to take that and chart a path forward. It's all about moving forward.
Absolutely learning from things. And I don't know about you, but I think, the idea that you're promoting, if we can embrace that as an idea when we're going through these things rather than just in retrospect.
Yeah.
Imagine how much different it can be and how more smooth that we might run through those things rather than being caught up in the anxiety or the resistance to what's happening.
It's so contrary to how we're wired, I think, because nobody likes to seek out pain. No animal is purposely pursuing pain, but, that it obviously can be a benefit. And, we seek pain in the gym. We seek pain in, first time circumstances. We seek difficulty in trying out for the sports team. So there are things that we purposely do that are going to challenge us. And the adversity, although we don't ask for it, it's the gift I like to say that nobody asks for. Nobody wants it. We're in the middle of it and never really realize it until they're out of it, and it might be sometime afterwards. So it's kind of an odd way to look at it as a gift, but it really, really does become that.
Yeah. And you and I have spoken before today's show, and so a little bit about my background, but I sort of cut my teeth working in the environment of trauma, with police, with train services, people like that. And so often there's these events that people experience, they go to work, think it's going to be a normal day, and these out of the ordinary things happen, and people come out the other side and think, how is life ever going to be the same again? And so often it's not, but it doesn't mean it's got to be worse. Actually, it can be different. In some ways, it can be richer.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting about thing about those circumstances is there's really nothing we can do about the circumstance after it's happened. And that's the thing that, gets us stuck, right? We get into that and we ruminate and we live in that environment, and that holds us back from moving forward in whatever capacity that is. We may not be the same ever, but we still should strive to move forward and try to make the most out of whatever it is that we have. And I've talked with people who've lost children and people who've lost, have had major health struggles and things like that. And nobody would ever say that was a gift to, necessarily have those things happen. But in hindsight, with perspective in time, they can look at it as, in some cases, something positive may have come from that. Mm-hmm. Certainly life, the life trajectory changed, and trying to find some good, in the darkness is really healthy, because you do need to move forward. I mean, we need to keep moving ahead. There's no gain for us to stay stuck, in my opinion. So, how do you facilitate that? How do you, come to terms with that for yourself? I had one of the people I interviewed in my website, wrote a book about cancer survival. He had gone through cancer 5 times. And he said, after the 3rd time, I was like, what's next,
Yeah, no more gifts. Yeah.
Yeah, he found that if he took greater ownership of the journey, and became more accountable to the outcome, even though he's not a doctor, but so he read everything he could. He challenged the doctors. He owned his outcome. And that's very powerful. Yeah. Even when you think, well, how can I solve the, this medical issue? I don't have those capabilities, but I can take it to a point which allows me to have some control, some influence over the outcome in the direction. And that becomes part of the gift, if you will, because you can facilitate, a forward movement. So, going on the offensive, as opposed to the defensive when you're in adversity, to some extent, I think helps you gain some control and courage.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'm interested you mentioned control and influence there. I often teach clients a model, CIA, control, influence, and acceptance. So differentiate. You can't direct the whole situation. Maybe you can chip away at it and break it down into components and tackle those in different ways.
Yeah. And, you can, I'm very fond of the saying, control the controllables. There's a lot of things you just cannot control. And so why waste time trying to do that? Control what you can, influence what you can, exactly in line with what you're saying. And you're empowered when you do that. Otherwise, you end up in a victim sort of mindset, and that doesn't really help anybody. Yeah. If anything, it puts you in a worse circumstance. A dear friend of mine who lost his son, was heartbroken and, just destroyed when he lost his son. And it took a few years, but eventually they came around to establish a foundation under his name and began to use that circumstance to begin helping other children. And so he looks back now 10 years and he can talk about it in a different way. It just took on a completely new meaning. He turned that pain into purpose. And, he could have, and probably still does, have a lot of remorse, of course. But this is a way to balance those things that happen to us in life that we can't control, and put it in some sort of perspective.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And you started off today by talking about how one of the reasons why you're curating all these things is for younger generations. Do you think that society's set up for young people to embrace some of these challenges in the way that perhaps it was for previous generations?
It seems to me, after looking at this topic for a while, that we as a species have continued to decrease the amount of adversity we have in our lives. That's almost like an evolutionary track, right? Where everything has gotten easier.
Yeah.
You talk about if you talk about your great grandparents and what they need to do, in a typical day versus what we need to do. It's a huge thing. Go back 100 years and the examples are pretty obvious, but with the younger generation, who really has grown up in an environment, these last 15 or 20 years in the world have been unusual and have been fraught with lots of conveniences and technologies and everything that has, helped us make the path in life so much simpler than it's ever been. And so my fear with that is there's nothing wrong with technology and the enhancements to make life easier and more efficient and all of those things. It's just that when adversity strikes, we're less apt to deal with it because we haven't gotten toughened at all. We haven't been able to build up our muscle memory to deal with those things. So those are the things in terms of trying to give the younger generation perspective and to see these examples and to know that for the most part, many things in life are temporary and we'll get through those. But to have the confidence and courage to be brave, pushing through those things and realizing that as a result, you're going to be better and stronger.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally agree. And I was thinking about my own children, and it's a common refrain for me, and they'll roll their eyes. But actually, even things like not to trivialize adversity anyway, but even things like tolerance for boredom. All of these things, they help you to withstand difficulties for longer, don't they? Actually, to be creative and to think your way out of situations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So much of our life today is a point, click, and order up. Mm. Even food.
Yeah.
I'm hungry. Well, somebody will show up at the door with it, for you.
Yeah. And multiple choices. Rather than it's this or it's this.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so it's just been this ultra convenient time to be alive. And so, we know life has a way of surprising us, and what we've come to know, throughout history, there's been cycles of things that have changed how we have lived and how to adapt. So it's hard to embrace again pain and difficulty when everything is so easy.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for the soul in a way, and it reminds us, of our humanity, and keeps us humble.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you're saying there, because I think I do a lot of work in the corporate arena, and I'm thinking about that idea of suffering, humility. That actually, even in this day and age, there's a lot of leaders who think about this idea of presenting perfection. And yes, we want to be competent at what we do, but actually sometimes acknowledging some of those difficulties that we've been through actually helps to normalise other people's experiences, doesn't it? And creates more authentic and open conversations.
Yeah, and I would say that's a real healthy change in our society, and to some extent, because 20, 30, 40 years ago, we never really talked about, let's say, the family business or the issues that we are feeling internally. That was sacrosanct. We just as a culture felt that we had to keep that inside. And has the pendulum swung too far? Perhaps in some cases where there seems to be sometimes no limits to what we share. Yeah. And that may or may not be good. Probably depends on that. So we are where we are. And it has, I think a lot of topics have gotten on the table that would have never been talked about before, which are a positive thing. Mm-hmm. And so some transparency is a good thing. And but I do think, I know, going back to those experiences I had when I was going through the things that I was going through, there was really a reticent for me to let anybody know what I was, experiencing, because I felt that I would be judged. And truthfully, I think I would have been judged, so some of that self-preservation that goes into play, you have lived through things and experienced things. Not everything needs to be shared, because that can create compromising circumstances. Absolutely. Too for someone. So we can't be all transparent all the time. We need to protect our ourself and our sense. And certainly some of this transparency is good, but too much, and like they say, how much oversharing can you do, and at what point is it too much?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I'm all for sharing. As a therapist, it's a really important thing for people to do, but there is such a thing as putting yourself in vulnerable positions by oversharing, but also,
right.
Sometimes I think that oversharing is also an indication of lack of tolerance for holding things. So we put them out there in the world because we can't tolerate to hold them for ourselves. So there's that sense of balance that needs to be struck.
I think people, with perspective, people will hopefully make better choices around those things. And if they see how others have handled things and the benefits and the negatives of how they deal with their information and their circumstance, we do have a lot more examples of that today, kind of in our view than ever before. So, but what I get excited about is seeing people that I've talked to who have really climbed out of different circumstances. And, were it not for their sharing of it, you wouldn't have assumed that they had any of those problems. And then to see how that experience has fortified their daily life, they are, once you come through some very adverse circumstances, you are a completely different person. It is a transformation. And so, whether it's someone who, had an illness and overcame it and then became much more confident in their business, for instance, because we fought this, that gives me an additional dose of courage. Yeah. Young man, just out of college, who
skills that don't just apply to that arena, but they echo out in some other things that you do. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. But that's it. You're capturing these skills that you didn't realize you had. One young man who I saw, he was speaking at a function. I teach at the college, and I get a chance to, put my philosophy to work in my courses. And a young man who spoke at one of our functions, was blind. He's standing over in the corner. I didn't know why he was there necessarily, and he had his cane, and he walked up and he spoke for about 20 minutes on technology. And I said, I've got to talk to that guy. I've got to talk to him about his journey, because I knew he was recently blinded.
Okay.
So he had a chronic illness, which led to permanent blindness, and it all happened within the last 5 or 6 years. So, he shared with me that journey and how devastating it was at first. And then, as a therapist, you go through different phases from denial to finally accepting, and then building on that. And he's now, he's a motivational speaker. He's got a family, just had a new child, and it probably made him more who he is, or who he could be, than if he were to have kept his sight. Very capable guy, very, dynamic young man. But that put him into a completely different set of circumstances, which he embraced and leveraged to add another degree of sort of a superpower for him, But again, what choice did he have? He could complain, of course, which he probably did, and he could wallow in his own self-pity. But he said, I'm going to lean into this. I'm going to make this part of who I am. And I'm going to inspire everybody that I get a chance to talk to about how limitations shouldn't stop you from what your dreams are. Yeah. That's powerful.
It's fantastic, isn't it? And I think it puts a lot of other people's challenges into proportion, doesn't it? It's incredibly inspiring.
Yeah. To that point, Richard, I think about this a lot, and I realize that everybody gets to decide what degree of adversity they can handle. Like, it's all very personal. So what might feel like adversity to me may feel like the end of the world to somebody else, or vice versa. And what I might see as a minor inconvenience of sorts, somebody else feels it's the end of the world. And we see that especially as, with youth as they mature, and, for mom and dad talking to the child about whatever that first thing was that they experienced, it's the end of the world, first breakup, whatever it might be. So, you do get perspective, but everybody deals with it, I think. And it'd be interesting your thoughts as a therapist. At least what I've discovered is the feelings and the emotional side of that is going to be the same whether you're dealing with, if somebody's dealing with, death of a spouse, and somebody is dealing with losing their iPhone,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still the same feeling.
Yeah,
it just has different impact.
Absolutely. So, it's all related to the individual, isn't it? And as you say, some of that is about lived experience up to that point, your reference point, as to how
Right.
serious that is, and the evidence you've got that you're able to deal with it. And some of it is the value that we place on things, isn't it, in relation to ourselves? What does this say about me? So a lot of it is about the personal value that we attach to something. I see it's a lot of trauma work. Different people come away from the same experience with very different takeaways. Some people will see it as just an unfortunate thing that happened. Some people see it as a statement about them. And some of that is based upon circumstance. Some of that is based upon upbringing. All of these different things come into play. And I think it's important we validate everybody's experience, but equally we try and encourage people to maximise that as an opportunity, given that we don't have any choice on whether it's happening or not.
Yes, right. And, everybody's process of getting through it's going to be different too. It's going to take longer, take, a different time frame for every person based on their unique circumstances. So we need to acknowledge that, or be aware of that. So I think that's the other thing I've seen in these stories is just how long it may have taken somebody to get to the other side, let's say, to a good place, or to embrace whatever that was as a source of strength, as fuel to push forward to something else. And, some people, it may just take a short time, and others, it may take a lifetime. So, but getting through it is certainly the goal in one way or another. Ending up on the other side of it with a new perspective is hopefully what everybody gets to.
Yeah, definitely is what we need to aspire to, isn't it? And are there ways in which you think people can develop more resilience around adversity? Are there active things that you've come across you think, actually, this is something that we should all consider developing, irrespective of whether we're going through a situation or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think, first of all, is being aware of your strengths and weaknesses. I think it's important to have some sort of an inventory of yourself, because, we make decisions every day that could create adversity. And I wrote a little article on the site about stop creating your own adversity, because, oftentimes we'll just act without thinking. That's just human nature. And we get ourselves into a situation. It's like, man, now I got to deal with that, right? So I would say try to be as conscious and conscientious of those decision processes. Build some foundation for yourself that you're operating from. So these circumstances aren't created, without some forethought. And for me, I've come up with what I call my pillars. My 5 pillars, which help me manage my life. Yeah. So faith, having faith. I have faith in God, and love God, love people is a watchword for me. And everybody's going to have their own, degree of that. But I think it's hard to move through life without having some faith, and without believing that you're here for a purpose, and it matters. I also feel it's important to have good friends. Yeah, my friends have been so instrumental in my life, and especially even in high school. And I share a story about my high school friend who really helped me get on a path different than where I was going through those difficult times of mine, and ultimately going to college. He was my college roommate, and it changed my trajectory. So having good friends, being a good friend, finding friends that make you better is helpful, because if you're with people that make you better, you will get into fewer issues. You will have fewer circumstances to have to navigate out of. So friends, finances is another one, as just as a normal sort of course in your life. It's a big part of everybody's life, but we typically run into problems when we outspend our finances. And now there's adversity right there staring at us. So kind of learning to live with that and building that is important, just to know what your boundaries are, because if you don't, then you will find yourself getting into trouble, and one problem can create another problem, creating another problem. So, life is never perfect, but just having your eye on those key things. And the last one I think have is fun. Have a reason to have fun, and find something you love to do. Do it. That's the reward in life. Don't ignore that. Make sure you're allocating enough time in your life for those things. And the last one would be family. If you're blessed to have a family, take care of your family. Those are important relationships. And if you ignore those, that creates adversity too. So I think if you cover all those bases and, be mindful of how you interact within those things, it's going to be, you'll have perhaps less adversity. Not that you will have none, but you should have less.
Yeah. I think those are all really useful things to consider. And they're all different forms of support, aren't they? But there's a lot in there around thinking about things outside of yourself, isn't there? Thinking about people, thinking about higher purpose or faith. And I think this is so important, isn't it? Because I think, yes, we need to be self-aware, but it's that balance, isn't it, between that and being too self-absorbed. We actually can get bogged down in thoughts, and sometimes having these connections, it's, you can get practical support from that, but also different perspectives on things. It's very easy to get locked into one way of being, particularly when you're going through a difficult period.
Yeah. Well, that's why faith is so important. And by and large, the world is made up of the faithful. There's, 8 billion and there's 6 billion that, have faith. And maybe more than that just aren't counted. So we realize that we need to have that connection to a higher power, to God, and to follow those tenets that make life better, make life more rich and rewarding, and typically are engaged in the good things in life. So if you ignore that, again, it opens you to adverse circumstances. You disregard good things in life and choose different paths that could, create a bad outcome.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most important one of all of them. Again, don't create your own adversity. Rule number one.
So true, isn't it? There's enough adversity without going looking for it. Yeah. So who contributes to the website? Is it just people that happen to find the website that provide stories, or is there a way in which you sort of collect those?
Yeah, I have had a few people come to the site, just found it by looking for it. I have now a total of 7,500 visitors to the site. So that was a number that has surprised me. It's been about a couple of years I've been working on this, and I've acquired. Generally, I acquire the stories by finding a story or a circumstance that I think is worth talking about. Just from meeting people or from seeing somebody posting something. Maybe there's a conversation in Facebook or LinkedIn or one of the social media platforms. Oh, this person has a story to tell. Let me connect with them and help that story come out. And typically, I author the stories with approval from the person I'm writing about. So you don't have to be a writer to submit your story. So I try to interview them and take a sense of what they gained, help them understand maybe what I see and maybe they didn't see. So that part of the experience actually for me is really interesting. And you know this as a therapist. I'm not a therapist, not a trained therapist. But just having that really raw conversation sometimes is really powerful. And in some cases, it's very cathartic too for the person that sharing their story, and they kind of takes them right back into where that all happened, whatever it was, and then that resilience that they gained from that. And so, I'd love to continue to add more stories. I would love your listeners to go on the site and share their information so I can contact them and, write their story. And know that, everybody has a story. It doesn't have to be the first one or the only one of something. I think, we all have gone through similar things. And I bet over the course of all the adversity out there that we can put everything into certain buckets. Maybe there's 10 adversity buckets, but everybody's experience in going through those is going to be unique and different, and how they got to the other side. And that learning and that perspective is what's valuable to the person who might be seeing your story.
Yeah.
And, without really knowing where this was going, when I put this whole thing together, I wanted to make sure that if somebody came to my site in an adverse circumstance, in a really, in a trauma-induced situation, I wanted them to be able to find help that was beyond just maybe a story that was here. So I also have on the site a list of resources that somebody's, in a crisis situation, if somebody is in a spiritual crisis, if somebody's in homelessness, if somebody's dealing with, other circumstances, there's resources that they can go to get help beyond just reading a story. So I don't know, how people are getting here necessarily and what mindset they may be coming in. They may have gone through something, so I need to see what other people have done, or maybe I'll get some perspective and give me a different view of what I'm dealing with. But if it's beyond that, I want to make sure that they have another place to go.
Makes absolute sense. And for people who are listening or watching this and don't know the website, are you able to share the website address for people?
Sure. It's www.giftsofadversity.com. There's a link there. You can just shoot me an email and share your information. We can connect. If you have a story that you've already prepared, and some people, I think there is a initiative in our era now to create these legacy stories that can be passed on to families. So many people at our age have probably thought through some of these things. Maybe they've actually put pen to paper. Maybe that story that they already have created has a great place here as well as wherever else it's going. So, I would invite people to look at this as one more place in the universe for their story to exist.
I love that idea. That's a fantastic idea. Brilliant. We're just coming towards the end now, Mark. Any final thoughts that you want to share with the viewers or the listeners?
Yeah, I have one favorite story that was told to me by a pastor, actually, which I find to get so much peace from. And that is, we're going through life, and adversity hits us. We have a tendency as humans to deal with adversity and everything in life as sort of a binary thing. We're up and we're down. How you doing? I'm great. Oh, I'm not so great. And we go through life with that sort of on and off switch. I'm doing good or I'm not doing good. And the thing that was shared with me was the importance of remembering that while you're doing this, there's still a lot of stuff happening on another track. So don't think of your life as a roller coaster so much, but more like a train track. And on one track is the bad stuff, whatever that is. But at the same time in your life, the good stuff is happening too. And if you just focus on the bad stuff, you're going to miss all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So you may be spending all this time, years or months, days, whatever it is, whatever that time is, focusing on all the bad. And in the meantime, all these good things have happened that you lost, you missed. And that just hits me so squarely. And getting that perspective about our lives and being able to sort of compartmentalize almost the good and the bad. Don't lose the good because, it's not going to come around again. While you're in the middle of the bad stuff, the good stuff is just going to keep going and you've missed it. And I think maintaining that mindset helps you live a more balanced life.
Thank you. I really, really, really like that. I hope that's helpful for a lot of people who are listening. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic. So it'd be great, maybe a little bit further down the line, to get you back on and get an update on how things are going with the website and anything else that you're working on, and continue this conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I really appreciate the chance to share it, and thanks for being able to, uncover all of these little anecdotes and ideas to help your listeners.
Thank you.
This is the business of thinking. Mastery doesn't end here. See you in the next episode.